Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today is August 11th. This is one of my herb container gardens. I'm going to show you how to dehydrate just about everything you see here. We'll go over that. Being the middle of August, the cool weather's coming, the frost is coming, so I'm just going to show you how to set this up late in the season so that you can get great growth until the frost finally comes and takes care of most of these plants. Now, it's been a pretty good summer. Let's start with the basil. Basil starts to have a flavor change and leaf texture change as it gets larger. And you can see that the flowers are coming in. You always want to plant basil sort of staggered. Every 2 weeks drop new seeds. This way you get the new tender growth coming up while your other plants are dying out from weeks before. This was cut back. You can see new growth does come. I'm going to cut all this down. I'm going to show you how to save the leaves. When the leaves start getting a little bit tougher, the flavor's a little more intense, this is when I like to dry it. We're going to dry some sage. This is parsley. It's starting to flower. You could let this go, and I think I'm going to do that to be able to save some seeds. So I'll show you how to collect the seeds down the line. But when a plant begins to flower, it's going to turn the seed and you harvest parsley right off the top. All the mint's going to be cut back. It's going to be cut down. I'm going to dry some of that. Right in here is oregano. We're going to take most of that off too and dry it. One issue happened. This is where one of my thyme boxes were, and the thyme has died back. I'm going to cut that down. Hopefully it comes back, but the mint grew over it and just blocked the sun out of there. The chives are all going to get cut back and dried. The beauty of having your own garden is I know there's nothing sprayed on any of these, so I can just harvest them and dry them. Minus a couple of insects, things will be perfectly fine. Lavender's going to keep going. This is garlic chives. They're going to get dried also, along with some more of the regular chives. And here's a thyme that is doing really well. If you've been watching my videos, you saw that I cut this back really far. I'm not going to harvest this to dry. I'm just going to let it keep growing. I'm using it fresh in my dishes right now. So let's get to dehydrating. And let me give you a tip actually before I cut and start preparing some of these. When you dehydrate, you want to use an oven at about 170 degrees Fahrenheit. You want a nice low heat. If you raise the heat too high, you're actually going to burn and evaporate all the essential oils. So a low heat. A cookie sheet or oven sheet that has holes in it really works well. It lets the heat circulate underneath the herbs and they dry more evenly and more quickly. But a lot of people may not have this. So what you can do is just wrap your cooking sheet in foil and then wrinkle it. It'll create ridges. The herbs will sit up on the ridges and it'll dry much more quickly and evenly. All right, let's get to harvesting off most of these herbs and getting them onto trays and into the oven. And then we'll get to feeding the plants when we're done. So let's start with the chives. You can go ahead and, pick out the brown or the yellow chives. I don't worry too much about it. I just kind of quickly go through it, remove what I see. It's okay if some of them are yellow. They're going to dry out anyway. And then I just cut them and spread them out just like that. Cut them off in big bunches. They're hollow. They're going to dry pretty quickly. And remember, keep the oven at about 170 degrees. And with the chives, you can pile them on a little bit more than you might with some of the other herbs you're drying, because again, they're hollow, and you can just go in and every once in a while roll them around, and that just helps the heat go around them, through them, and dry them quickly. And I would fill up the entire tray with herbs just like that. With the basil, you want to just really pick off the leaves that look better. And you're just going to dry the leaves. Drying the stems are kind of too woody at this point. Just drop the leaves all over. And let's do real quick. Of course, I'll put a lot more on there for the basil. And then for the mint, I dry them with the stems. You can use these for teas once they're dry. You can use them in drinks. You can use them in dishes. Just drop them on there. The leaves are going to dry first, and what you can do once they're dry is just go and strip them and then get rid of the stems. If you're going to make teas, you'd want to keep the stems. And just set them up just like that. The heat will go through there. These will dry quickly. Drying times are going to vary depending on how much humidity and what kind of oven you have. So that's the setup for the mint, for the basil, and then I do the same thing with oregano. And I would just sit it on there, let it dry. The leaves will dry first. I don't really like keeping the stems. Sometimes they're woody, so once they're dry, I just crinkle off the leaves and put them into a jar or a Ziploc bag. Alright, so let's get all of these drying, and I'll also talk about sage. Garlic chives are done the same way as the chives. So for the sage, I'm just going to cut them back. Make them a little bit smaller. It smells wonderful. And I'm just going to pull off the leaves and dry the leaves with everything else. And then once they're dry, I would break them up and I'll put them in a Ziploc bag or in a small container. Don't worry if you pack more on there than you think you should. We're going to go in about every hour and just move them around and let the heat, get to them more evenly. So I've put some in the first level of my oven already. Mint on the side there. That is chives, and I'm just using foil. If you don't have a cookie sheet or a cooking sheet, go ahead and just use foil. Let me close that one up. But what you do want to do is make sure the heat is slow and low. Too high, they're going to burn, or you're going to evaporate out all the essential oils. And we'll come and check on this about every hour. Alright, let's go back out to the garden and fertilize the container garden. So everything's been cut back. I'll tell you what's in the water-soluble fertilizer in a second. Remove the leaves that I don't want, drying the other leaves, but everything pretty much got a nice haircut, cut back. There's the excess herbs that I'll be throwing into the compost pile. Before I get to the feeding, I just want to show you what I'm doing. I talked to you about putting the basil in every couple of weeks. Well, this is the basil that's going to replace everything that's matured, flowered, and is getting dried now. Now, every 10 to 14 days, my plants have been getting a basic organic water-soluble fertilizer. Usually fish emulsion, sometimes another product, but something that just has NP and K nice and low. But towards the end of the season, after they get cut back pretty harsh, I like to put in some of the chemical fertilizers. Now they're high in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, usually somewhere like a 15, 30, 15. Quarter strength brings that down well below a 10, but it's also packed with the other micronutrients and other things, and that's what I want to give the plants now. You can certainly use the chemical fertilizers. You're not poisoning yourself. You're not poisoning your plants, but you just don't need to overuse them. I'd like to show people how much I put into the soluble fertilizer. Everyone asks me, well, how much do you water them? Water them enough to really soak all of the soil. Kind of visually in your mind, figure out how much of the liquid it takes for it to really kind of sink down to the bottom. And you can go, all these have holes in them, so you can water your container plants just till you start seeing the water trickle out the holes. Here is the basil that I cut back. There's more soil in there, so you'll get more. Just a tip, lavender, this is rosemary, but rosemary and lavender don't like to stay wet in the soil. They're used to drier climates, so try and skip waterings on your lavender and rosemary every once in a while. Chives got cut back almost to the ground. Give them a good drink, and then I would work my way all the way across. Now this is a plant that's died and beat up because it was covered by the mint. I might give that a higher strength chemical fertilizer with the full 12, 15, 24 nitrogen just to get the leaf growth coming back. But that's up to you. If you want to stay 100% organic, that's perfectly fine. I didn't cut this one back as much. I'll just give it a quick drink. This is the lavender I was talking about. But this is plenty of nutrients to take care of these plants till the frost comes here in Maryland Zone 7. And now that I did this, use a little bit of the chemical fertilizer, I'll just go back onto my routine. Every 10 to 14 days, water-soluble organic, probably fish emulsion, and that will take care of these plants. Okay, let's let everything dry in the ovens, and I'll show you what that looks like. Here are the herbs that I dried. I just wanted to give you a tip. I'm using a new oven, so it's set at 170 degrees Fahrenheit. I got busy with the video and left them in straight 4 or 5 hours, and they just got way too hot and they turned way too brown, and that means the flavor is gone. You evaporate the oils, you burn the leaves a little bit. So if you're using an oven for the first time, crack it. You really want these to dry realistically at 130 degrees, 140 degrees, and by cracking an oven that's set to 170, it'll go nice and slow and low, and it's going to take realistically anywhere from 3 hours to 7 hours for your herbs to dry. It's also been a week since I shot the first half of this video. I wanted to show you what the herbs look like 7 days later after we cut them back and fed them. So I re-dried some of them. Let me show you what I have. This is my sage. Once you dry sage down and you crush it up with your fingers, it gets this nice silvery blue look to it, and then you can pulverize it down. I use a coffee grinder. It just works better in dishes that way. This is my oregano. I use mason jars to store it. The chives look great. They taste wonderful. That's the basil. This is basil dried the correct way. If we grab some of the mistake basil, you can just see how brown it is. It just got burned. The flavor's not there. And if you don't have an oven or you want to go super slow, you can just hang your herbs from your kitchen. It'll take about 7 to 14 days for them to dry this way. All right, let's get back to the herbs. So it's been 7 days. I wanted to wait 7 days just to show you the growth. And the chives and the garlic chives have come back with a vengeance. I mean, it's probably 6 inches worth of growth. I never cut back the thyme up here, but it's doing really well. That's lavender. We're letting that go. The mint is all coming back. You can see all the new growth in there. This is the thyme that was covered by the mint, and I think that's going to be a hard save, although there is some new growth right in there. And again, the mint's all coming back. Chives, again, another 6 inches worth of growth. Things look really, really good. Leaving this to seed. We're going to collect parsley seeds in the video. And this is the basil that I cut back, and you can see how it's coming out the side. So your basil will regrow. Just cut it back. Go ahead and cut it back really close to the ground, leave the roots in there, and you're going to get all that new growth. At the same time, go and seed some more basil somewhere else. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out my blog at www.therustedgarden.com, and please check out my YouTube videos. Thanks for watching.